My guest is Jazmín Irazoqui-Morales, and she runs a law firm called the UndocuLawyer firm. She knows all of the ins and outs about how people can become undocumented lawyers and exactly what you need to do to get all of your ducks in a row to get your status corrected. And if it can be corrected, I learned a lot in this episode, and trust me, you will too. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Break into Law School. I'm your host, Lavetta Jenkins. Welcome, Jasmine. Thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thank you so much for having me, Lavetta. I'm really excited.
So am I, because you have probably one of the most interesting subject matters I have ever heard of, because I've never heard of it. Tell me first a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Jasmine or Jasmine, like most folks call
Mhm.
me. I am originally from Los Mochis, Sinaloa, Mexico. I was born there. And when, at some point in my childhood, my family immigrated to the United States. We lived in Phoenix, Arizona. And when I was 16, I learned I was undocumented. Eventually, my family moved to New Mexico, where I, went on to pursue higher education. I went through undergrad, got a finance degree, then law school, and eventually became a lawyer. But, because I was undocumented, I was originally from Mexico and then learned that I didn't have any status. Going through higher education, university, and then law school it had its own set of challenges that I'm really passionate about ensuring that folks know they can go to school regardless of immigration status. They can get their law license if that's what they want to do, or any other occupational or professional license. And what I do in my firm, the UndocuLawyer firm, is help immigrant communities, regardless of status, seek economic security through entrepreneurship, or what the Gen Zers are calling this these days, independent contracting.
Okay. Okay. So you mentioned that you found out at 16 that you were undocumented. What was that day like for you?
Yeah, when I was 16, man, I don't know. I guess I would say my sister and I'm a twin, and we both found out in the same day, have talked about that a lot. And we used to be the most lively kids ever. Like, we were in student government, we played volleyball, basketball, softball, like straight A students. Like, we were the epitome of what you would think, like, oh man, those are like the first gen kids that are really smart, like the model minority going to college. And right around that time, my mom had a stroke. And so we knew that there was something wrong because mom didn't come home, but it was because mom had a stroke at work. And luckily, she was at work. She worked in the medical field, and they immediately got her into a room and got her the treatment that she needed. But then we just kind of didn't see mom for, I don't know, probably a couple weeks while she was in recovery. And my twin sister and I are like, you know what, mom's a single mom and she needs help. Maybe it's time for us to go get a job. We had just turned 16 in March. This was April. I'm talking about April of 2008. And we tried to go get a job. The lady was very nice and very discreet because Arizona has a large immigrant community. And when things weren't adding up, she's like, I think you two girls need to go talk to your mom. And we were like, well, what do you mean? And she said, the socials aren't adding up. And at the time, Arizona had already implemented e-verify. So what I assume happened, now being a lawyer, is she probably ran an I-9 and the e-verify program and found out like something's not adding up with these two girls. So then we waited for my mom to come back from the hospital. This must have been like a week or so later. And when we tell my mom what happened, my mom starts bawling and she's crying and she's telling us in the language that she knows at the time. She's like, it's because we're illegal. She didn't know any other way of how to say what her immigration status was. And I remember my sister and I looking at each other like, oh, what does that mean? Like, can we go to college? Is this why you would never let us get a driver's license, or why you would get so nervous when we would travel with the softball team down to the south of Arizona for our softball games, or why when we would go with our church pastor to California, you would be freaking out? Like, it all makes sense now, but what does this mean now? And I think since then, I can't speak for my sister, but I know for me, it was very much like, well, how does this impact me and the way that I exist in this world that already tells me I don't have a place because I am a person of color, because I am a woman, because I'm first generation. And then on top of that, mom, you're telling me you told me I'm illegal, but now I know I'm undocumented because no human being is illegal. But how does that, like on a 16-year-old, it was a lot to process.
Yeah, I can only imagine. So I think that instead of that putting your fire out, I would say it probably fanned the flames a little bit, because from that moment, you guys had to make some decisions about where you lived. What was that like?
Yes, so that was probably when I realized, oh, mom makes really big decisions to ensure our safety and to ensure that our family prospers because the next day, less than 24 hours later, we were in a lawyer's office and this lawyer, I don't know where my mom found this lawyer. She must have been the yellow pages at the time, who knows. And the lawyer was like, "Oh, well, you're not eligible to well, and I've used this in multiple speeches before. The attorney actually said, in this country, you're no one. In this country, you don't exist. You'll be lucky to go to a community college or do anything that isn't cleaning houses or doing construction because you don't have any status and you don't have eligibility to get any status in the future." That wasn't true. Now, having practiced immigration law, I know that my sister and I would have been eligible for what's called special immigrant juvenile status that day. And had that lawyer said, I don't practice immigration law, but maybe go talk to these lawyers, he could have saved us years, years of hardship. And, it didn't happen. Things happen for a reason. I'm a firm believer in that. Um, but after that, the following week we were in New Mexico because my sister and I had come on a church trip here with our church to Glorieta, New Mexico. And I was like, Mom, I remember that the freeways are really pretty there. Maybe, we should look and see what their policies are like. My mom was Googling, and Governor Richardson at the time had said, I'm going to institute immigrant friendly policies. So by June of 2008, my entire little family had moved to New Mexico in a tiny little green Suzuki, and we uprooted our lives and started our lives over here.
So after you completed high school and you got into college, what made you decide maybe I want to take on law?
It's something that I had always, well, I think at the end of the day, I ended up getting degrees in two of the areas that really impact the immigrant community. Because in addition to law and how the law works and what you are lawfully allowed to do, whether we even have lawful presence, or a pathway to citizenship or immigration status. The second piece of that is existing, having any kind of financial identity. So after finance school and going to law school, I think before then I was like, why are all these systems just seemingly like stacked against us, right? Like naive me, like, oh, there has to be something wrong. Like maybe there's just some education that needs to happen. But no, I think it was constantly being told no, constantly being told that our existence wouldn't amount to anything or that we didn't even really exist in this country. And my mom working so hard, and even when people would blatantly tell her to her face no, she'd be like, no, there has to be another way. And so I think that is what fueled my desire to not only pursue a degree in finance and understand how financial markets impact undocumented communities or mixed immigration status communities, but also law, and use the intersection of both to ensure economic security regardless of immigration status.
Hmm. So you finished undergrad,
I did, yes.
got into law school. When did you become documented? When did you get a green card?
Oh, so I was undocumented all throughout undergrad. My entirety of law school, because I obtained protection from deportation my last semester of law school. It was the spring of 2017, maybe. And in that semester, I got what's known as deferred action for childhood arrivals, or DACA, for children who meet a certain criteria, or are in college, or somehow have served in the military and have been here for a really long time. I have no criminal history. And so when I graduated law school, I had DACA. I sat for the bar exam, passed it, and I applied for admission to the New Mexico State Bar with DACA and was denied. In March of 2018, I obtained a conditional green card or conditional legal permanent resident status through my US citizen spouse.
Okay. Okay. So you had to go through the kind of the spouse route. Now, I'm under the assumption because, Hollywood tells me that all you had to have done at 18 was marry a citizen. Is that not true?
No, it's a lot more complicated than that. And I think that is, the media, Hollywood, movies,
Right.
they add to this rhetoric of the mail order bride, or if you just marry a US citizen then you'll become a US citizen, or that's one side that isn't as bad as what I've heard before and has been told to my face. Oh, you just don't want to become a citizen because you don't want to pay taxes, which is absolutely not true. As someone who's practiced vast areas of tax law, immigrant communities pay more into taxes because they don't have a valid social security number and therefore not eligible to many of the poverty fighting tax credits that folks with the social security number have. So, but to answer your question more directly, no. Immigration law is so complex that me, an identical twin with my sister, same immigration history, same entry into the United States. She's a surgeon, I'm a lawyer. The only difference are our professions. I'm now a US citizen and she's not. And so similarly, folks, you could have two individuals and one gets married and has a pathway to citizenship and another one doesn't because of immigration history. It's very fact specific. Did you enter with an inspection? Did you have a visa when you first came in? Did you not? Have you had multiple entries? Did you violate the terms of that visa? Have you ever been deported? Have you ever been returned at the border? All those things are factors in who can get citizenship by simply marrying. Simply, right? Because even that, let's talk about the power imbalances by marrying a US citizen.
So say I have a brother. I just can't marry my brother to your sister and she's good. Like that's not how it can just happen.
I think in those situations, what often we see is community members go have consultations with immigration lawyers. And that, when you're talking about, right, because a lot of people are like, why can't I just fill out my own immigration paperwork? You could. The law belongs to the people, and the people should take ownership of the law. However, immigration law is so complex and designed in a way to not allow unworthy immigrants into the country that if you don't do the proper legal immigration law analysis about that person's immigration history, you could put them in danger. And so, in that situation, right, your brother marries my sister, then that lawyer has to say, okay, we got to do a full in depth history about your immigration history because when you told me XYZ, now I have to go verify. I have to go submit FOIAs to the federal government to make sure that what you're telling me matches what they tell me. Because if I submit an application and it doesn't match, immigration is going to deny your application.
Oh, so it is not as simple as we keep seeing on television and in all of the movies.
Not at all. It
Huh.
can be. It
Mhm.
definitely can be. And I'm so happy for folks who come to me and they have that easy route. And I say, go do it yourself. Here's a
Mhm.
nonprofit that will help you do it for free. But oftentimes, immigration histories are complex and tricky.
Mm. I'm learning more and more about immigration law in this particular podcast than I think I ever have. And I am a knowledge buff. I like to know a lot of things about a lot of things, but I didn't know this. I thought you just get married and boom, it's over with and everything's done. So, with all of this, have you come across other lawyers like yourself or other people who are in law school and find themselves in the exact same situation, undocumented? Can you take the bar? Well, clearly you can because you did, but how do they take the bar and become lawyers in a country that they aren't citizens in? Is that a thing?
Yeah, it's definitely a thing. And it's a great question because it varies. It's very state specific, right? And we got to get back to, I'm going to bore you a little bit, with the regulatory framework of it all. As we know, for those of us who are practicing lawyers or who are in law school or aspiring to law school, there's a hierarchy to our law in our country, right? We have federal supremacy because first we have the federal constitution, and then we have federal legislation, then the federal Supreme Court, and then, of course, the regulations and rules that follow that. And then we have states, state constitutions, state statutes, state regulations, and state Supreme Courts. So that's just a preface to saying, right, it's very specific to the state that you're living in. But yes, there are undocumented lawyers across the country in multiple states. There are lawyers who were undocumented while they were going through law school, then got status, and then, were admitted. But what I'm trying to paint the picture of is there are mixed immigration statuses out there, and you don't need to be a U.S. citizen to go to law school, to sit for the bar exam, to pass the bar exam, and to get admitted into law school. But it's very specific. How you do it and who you talk to and what that process is very dependent on your state.
Okay. You've mentioned your state and varying states a lot of times. I know we got 50. How many of the 50 are, what can I say, like a safe state for immigrants?
We have a network of about 16 states that have been able to change some type of policy. It may not be a statute, maybe it's a higher education policy, maybe it's a New Mexico Supreme Court rule, or somewhere within that framework, they've been able to change policy to allow undocumented students or mixed immigration status students to pursue higher education and sit for the bar exam. New Mexico is one of them. We, I believe, became the 16th state back in 2020 when we first passed a law. Well, let's take a step back. In 2017, with my state bar admission, the New Mexico Board of Bar Examiners started allowing bar applicants who had DACA. You could be undocumented, but you needed at least a work permit and protection from deportation to be able to be granted admission. Because, there's still this misconception that to be a lawyer, you're going to be an employee for a law firm. That's absolutely not true. You could be a lawyer and have your own law firm, and therefore, employment law, federal employment law, and immigration law doesn't apply to you. But I digress. There are other states. New Mexico is one of them. California is one of the leading states that has done this way before New Mexico ever did it. It was actually a California attorney, the first California attorney that I met, and he said, you need to talk to these people because that's who helped me when I was trying to get admitted. New York is another state. Back in 2016, when I was getting ready to figure out like the bar exam and sitting for it, that attorney who was running Bernie Sanders' campaign at the time told me, you need to talk to so and so because that's who helped me in New York. So now we have the East Coast and the West Coast trying to help little Southwest New Mexico figure its stuff out. Chicago is another state that has passed legislation. There are many, and I'm happy to send links after this, but the gist of it is there are states out there. And I think folks either naturally move there because they want to pursue law school or a specific profession, or they eventually get in contact with someone who asks them, what's your goal? Do you want to just go and do it? Or are you seeking to do advocacy in your state to change that law? Because here are the states where the law hasn't changed.
I love it. So let's say I have a friend who's has an undocumented child, and that child is, kind of in undergrad right now, but they think they want to go a little bit higher. They think they want to pursue any other profession or even just be a lawyer or like your sister, be a surgeon. What do they do? What is step one for somebody who wants to go higher, but they don't have all of their ducks in a row?
Oh man, I would say that someone who's already an undergrad has probably done a little bit of this because even to get into college, we have been advocating even to get into college because the number one barrier is social security number, immigration status, right? So if they've already done that, if they're already in undergrad and now are seeking to go beyond that, chances are they're in a state that either is immigrant friendly because they pass laws or is immigrant friendly in the way that their regulations are kind of silent on immigration law. But if they're already there, now they're trying to go to law school or go through higher education, then at that point, I usually ask them, do people know? Are you open about your status? Because if you're not, then I would really suggest that you talk to these folks. Like, you're in this state. Hey, look, there's these three surrounding states around you that allow you to do that. Apply to those law schools, go to that law school, sit for the bar exam in that state, and apply for admission in that state because you will be licensed. We know that the law has changed. We have people in the network who have done it. If you're not in a state like that, then the question becomes, are you part of the network that is going to be undocumented, unafraid, and unapologetic? Because if you are, you don't have to be, but if you are, it's going to take a lot of conversations, a lot of educating the institution, the provost, the president, the board of regents, the regulatory agencies on your ability to even get that license. Because there are schools that will consider that in denying your admission to law school about whether you can even get licensed, right? There's a lot of commonality when you talk about criminalization of our communities and immigration law. There are two areas that completely erase our communities and how systematized it is to keep us out of these places that can eventually put our community in positions of power.
Hmm. So, a child coming out of high school, much like you were, how do they get into college with no social and clearly probably no other paperwork?
If you're in one of the 16 states that has already changed the laws, chances are you can go to your high school counselor, and your high school counselor will be like, "Oh, I know that one person in that one department at this one university that can help you." If you're not in one of those states, then chances are your counselor will tell you, "Oh, I don't think you can go to college. Sorry. Here's maybe some vocational things you can do, maybe, if that." Um, that was luckily not my case. I had a great high school counselor who said, "I don't know what to do. I didn't even know you could be in this country without a social security number, but let's figure it out." And this is what I say that because sometimes that is the person that's going to help you at least get you in touch with folks. And luckily, my sister and I said we don't have anything else to lose. Like we were like undocumented and afraid. Please help me. How do I even get there? And sometimes it's just asking. The answer will always be no unless you ask. And even if they ask you and someone tells you no, you can go somewhere else and they'll say, "Oh, maybe, let's see." And it's just a matter of like, what is your threshold for risk and creativity?
Yeah. Probably risk, creativity, and no's. Like, how many no's are you willing to get before you try another one? I think that if you really, really want it, you should never take no. And if you have to move, then, you just might have to do that to make sure you get exactly where you're trying to go. Now, you started UndocuLawyer, the UndocuLawyer firm, because you wanted to make a difference in this community from the beginning, even though that wasn't your intention to start your own firm. Are you only helping just people who are Hispanic, or can I come from Kenya? Can I come from, like, Europe, and be able to talk to you about how I can get things settled?
Yes, definitely. I think, I sit in the state of New Mexico right next to Texas and Arizona, surrounded by Colorado. So we have a large Latinx and Hispanic population, so Spanish speaking immigrant population. So a lot of the folks that I support in an in-person basis, that's who I support. But I have folks who call me from DC, Virginia, California. I have people in Delaware that are like randomly calling me like, "Hey, I saw you on TikTok and I want to go to law school." And I'm from, I don't know, I had one student from Taiwan and I was like, "Yeah, you can go to law school. It doesn't matter what country you're from. If you're telling me you're not a US citizen and you need resources, here are the resources. Here it is state by state. Oh, you telling me you want to do advocacy in your state? Let's do this. Like, here's how we're going to do it in your state. And here's what I advise you to do. And then, by the way, put me in contact with your licensing authority, whether it's the Supreme Court or if it's a licensing department, because chances are I can talk to them and share resources so that all the work isn't on the one student. Because the other thing is, I highly advise them to get involved in some kind of grassroots community organizing or a local organization because there's power in numbers. I always tell people I didn't become undocumented and afraid all by myself. I was a little less afraid because there was an entire immigrant rights network across the country, the largest immigrant rights youth network behind me, advocating with me and suing the federal government with me so that we could claim space in a space that wasn't meant for us.
I think almost everyone, especially a person of color, has been in a space that wasn't really meant for you, but you had to get in there in order to make sure that not just you could come in, but other people could come in as well. I believe that we talked a little bit before about being intentional, and I would say you're an intentional advocate for people. Where does that come from?
That's a big compliment, I think, because I try to be, right? I think it's as it's a lot to put on first generation BIPOC professionals. It is a lot to put on them. And sometimes they don't have, mentors who can lead you in that direction. I feel very fortunate to have this lens and to continuously critically analyze, am I doing this for the right reasons? Am I ensuring that I'm opening doors for those behind me and not for my own gain? And that's because I luckily was involved with a group that was the mindset, right? If one of us rises, we all rise. If one of us is successful, we're all successful. And how do we ensure that? When we were in need, we turn to each other. When we're in success, we provide resources with each other. And I'm talking specifically about a network here in New Mexico. It's now called the New Mexico Dream Team, but it used to be called New Mexico Dreamers in Action. And it was a group of undocumented students that got together and said, "We want driver's license and we want to go to college. How do we do that?" And to date, there's a great mentor. Her name is Eli Kuna, who challenged me and said, "Why do you want to go to law school?" The question was, am I trying to do it for community, or am I doing it because I want a terminal degree and I want to make hella money and take advantage of people? Which is a good question to ask when you're trying to figure out, are you someone who wants to be part of the network for the right reasons?
Mm, I love it. So I got to ask, where can people find out more about you and about what you do? And if they need to get in contact with you, somebody who is undocumented or somebody who just wants to know how to help undocumented people, where can we find you all around the internet?
Oh, well, like any good lawyer, they can be Googled. I would say, if you can't find me by Googling the UndocuLawyer firm, I'm on TikTok, also the UndocuLawyer firm. I'm on Instagram, on Facebook. Even if you don't find the UndocuLawyer firm, you will find UndocuLawyer is up. And that was a term coined by the immigrant rights movement that I did advocacy with. And there are many of us, there's so many out there who are either in the pipeline or have already graduated and have also turned around and helped others. And then, of course, once you Google me, my phone number is up there, and the website, undoculawyer.com, is coming soon. It's still being built.
So we'll be able to find her there. But in the meantime, she's got plenty of cool TikToks, and you can find her on social media where to ask all of these good questions and get in that pipeline to find out for yourself. Yasmine, I thank you so much for being on with me today. I've learned so much, and I know we're going to have you back again. Thank you.